If you are 65 or older and prefer to be alone, here's what it says about you. Have you ever noticed that the older you get, the more you enjoy being alone? It's not because you're upset with anyone or trying to distance yourself. It's simply that there's a certain peace in solitude, a comfort in quiet, and a kind of freedom that comes from doing the little things you love without needing to please anyone else. Maybe there have been times when the phone rings and you let it go to voicemail, not because you're rude, but because your heart just isn't in another surface level conversation. Maybe the parties, the noise, the small talk have started to feel more exhausting than enjoyable. And maybe, just maybe, you've wondered, am I becoming strange? Is something wrong with me? Am I slowly drifting away from the life I used to know? Then there are the well-meaning voices, family members who urge you to go out more, talk more, socialize more, but all you truly long for is a quiet afternoon, a good book, maybe just watching the trees sway in your backyard, and somehow choosing that makes people think you're lonely. But today, I want to sit beside you, just for a moment, and offer something simple, something gentle, something you might need to hear right now. If you're over 65 and you enjoy being alone, it doesn't mean you're sad or isolated. It means you're wise. It means your soul has walked long enough, deep enough, to know what truly matters in this life. What do you think about that? Have you ever felt this way? In this video, we'll explore 6 powerful reasons why slowing down and choosing stillness isn't just a wise decision. It might actually be one of the greatest gifts of aging, and reason number 3 might even inspire you to start something new, something deeply meaningful, just for yourself. So if you've ever felt different for wanting a quieter life, for seeking solitude instead of noise, stay with me. By the end of this video, you might realize you're not alone at all. In fact, you're living more honestly than ever before. And if something I've said so far has touched you, maybe reminded you of something you felt, or maybe helped you see your own choices in a gentler light, then let me ask for a small gesture. Tap the like button. Share this video with a friend or loved one who might need to hear these words too. And if you're someone who's also chosen to slow down, to live at your own pace, just drop a simple comment below on Golden Wise Elders. I choose peace, because I truly believe you're not just living. You're living the way many younger people still dream of living. Free, thoughtful, and whole. Now let's begin our journey into the 6 powerful reasons why embracing stillness after 65 isn't just reasonable. It's a gift of the spirit, a gift you truly deserve. Let's start with something simple, yet so deeply foundational to a strong, fulfilling life in our later years, your health. Because when you choose to slow down, something remarkable happens. You begin to truly listen to your body and take better care of it. Once we pass 65, it becomes more and more clear that the body doesn't bounce back like it used to. But here's the beauty. The slower pace of life gives us the space to notice the little things we once ignored in the rush. We begin to catch the messages our bodies have been sending all along. Messages that used to get drowned out by work, family, obligations, and constant motion. I remember a conversation I had with Linda, a 67-year-old retired school teacher living in San Jose. She told me that during her working years, every day was a blur. She rushed from lesson plans to dinner prep, barely stopping to breathe. Even when she felt tired or unwell, she'd tell herself, just push through, I'll be fine tomorrow. But after retirement, and especially after starting to live alone, something shifted. For the first time, she noticed how her body truly felt. She wasn't waking up to an alarm anymore, but to the sunlight through her window. She wasn't eating out of urgency, but cooking small, nourishing meals for herself. She began going on gentle walks in the morning, practiced deep breathing, and most importantly, she learned to pause when her body asked her to. And after just a few months, she noticed something even more powerful. Her blood pressure had stabilized, her sleep improved, and her mood became lighter than it had been in years. We often think of health as doctors and medications, but often it begins with something much simpler. Awareness. When you're not constantly pulled in a dozen directions, you begin to notice. You eat because your body needs fuel, not because you're rushing. You sleep early not because you're exhausted, but because you've honored your day and are ready to rest. In fact, a Harvard Medical School study found that older adults who spend more intentional time in solitude, caring for themselves, tend to sleep better, maintain steadier heart rates, and report a deeper sense of emotional well-being compared to those living in overly stimulated, noisy environments. So if you're in your 60s or 70s and your days feel quieter now than they used to, don't be alarmed. That calm may be doing you more good than you realize. It could be your body's way of healing, resetting, and finally being heard. Because after all, No one knows you better than you, and no one can care for you more gently, more attentively than you. Once you've learned to listen to your body and take better care of your health, something else begins to come into focus, something just as important. It's the people around you, your relationships. This brings us to the second reason. You begin to value quality over quantity in your connections. There was a time when having a long list of friends, being surrounded by voices and conversations, felt like a sign of happiness. The more the merrier, right? But as we grow older and wiser, we start to realize something crucial. Not every relationship is meant to last. Not every acquaintance deserves a place in our later chapters, and not every social obligation adds value to our lives. I remember talking with Frank, a 72-year-old retired engineer. In the early days of his retirement, his calendar was packed. Meetups with old colleagues, coffee with former neighbors, dinner with groups of friends. But slowly he began to feel something shift. Those gatherings, once exciting, began to feel draining. The conversations felt hollow, the laughter forced, and the sense of belonging strangely missing. One day, after attending yet another reunion, Frank said to me, "I smiled the whole time, but when I got home, I felt completely empty." That line stayed with me. So he made a quiet change. Not dramatic, not abrupt, just intentional. He started to shrink his circle. He spent more time with people who made him feel safe in silence. People who listened, who didn't expect him to be anything but himself. He devoted more energy to his son, to his grandchildren, to an old friend of 40 years who still sends him postcards from time to time. And for the first time in decades, he made space for himself. As the social noise faded, Frank found something else. Peace. With fewer invitations came more time for meaning. More space for the moments and people that actually mattered. You see, when you choose who stays in your life with intention, you're also choosing self-respect. You're saying, my time is valuable. My energy matters. My heart deserves honesty. So let me ask you, is there someone in your life who brings you that kind of peace? Someone who doesn't require you to perform, or pretend, or push yourself past your limits just to connect? If there is, I'd love to hear about them. Write their name in the comments below, or simply write, "I'm keeping the ones who matter." And if you found yourself quietly stepping back from large gatherings or old routines, don't worry. You're not becoming distant. You're becoming discerning. You're not isolating. You're evolving. Once you've grown comfortable with the slower pace of life and let go of the pressure to maintain surface-level social ties, something truly beautiful starts to unfold. You begin to reclaim space. Space to learn, to explore, to grow in the ways that matter to you. Now, I know some people might chuckle and say, learn at this age, but here's the truth. That kind of thinking is outdated. And sadly, it's what holds many people back from enjoying one of the most fulfilling aspects of growing older. Because learning, true, joyful learning, isn't about chasing a degree or impressing anyone. It's about keeping your mind young, your heart curious, and your spirit engaged with life. I remember speaking with Eleanor, a 74-year-old former office manager from New Jersey. After she retired and began living alone, most people assumed she'd join local clubs or find group activities to stay busy. But Eleanor had something else in mind. She picked up the books she'd always wanted to read, philosophy, history, poetry. She began to paint, just a little each day, and after 3 months, she proudly hung her first painting in the living room. She told me with a smile, that felt even better than my first paycheck. But she didn't stop there. She started writing her life story. Not to publish it, not for recognition, just to remember it all, clearly and fully. She said, "I want to understand the life I've lived, and I find myself feeling more grateful for it every time I sit down to write." Some people take up cooking. Others try a new instrument, explore poetry, learn to use a smartphone, or start practicing yoga. And some simply learn how to slow down, how to sit still without getting anxious, how to stop replying to every message right away, how to be quiet without feeling alone. Because learning isn't always about facts or skills. Sometimes it's about diving inward, about living more deeply and understanding yourself more clearly, one day at a time. So I want to ask you, is there something you've always wanted to learn, but life got in the way? Is there a topic, a skill, or even just a little curiosity that's still whispering to you? If you had the time now, and I believe you do, what would you start learning today? I'd love to know. Share your thoughts in the comments below, even if it's just one small thing you'd like to try. And if this part of the video spoke to something inside you, let me know by tapping the like button. Share this with someone you care about, someone who might need the courage to begin again. And don't forget to subscribe to Golden Wise Elders, where every week we explore a new way of seeing aging, not as a decline, but as an invitation to go deeper into wisdom, into peace, and into the most authentic version of yourself. Once you begin carving out time to learn something new, whether it's rediscovering yourself or simply embracing a different way of living, something else often follows, almost effortlessly. Something we may have forgotten during our younger years, something we often missed while being swept up in responsibilities, deadlines, expectations, and the never-ending noise of life. That something is peace. And if there's one silent, sacred gift that aging gives us, I believe it's this: the ability to recognize the true value of peace. Not a peace you can buy, not one you can rush into, but the kind you can only feel when you've slowed down enough, listened deeply enough, and lived long enough to finally understand it. I still remember a story from Gerald, a gentleman in his 70s who lives alone in a cozy house with a garden and a creaky wooden chair on the porch. He told me that when he was younger, he was everywhere, at meetings, events, social dinners. Wherever there was noise, he was in the middle of it. But after retirement, he began to quietly step away. Not because he was upset or disconnected, but because, as he said, the noise just didn't mean anything to me anymore. So instead of rushing out, he started spending his mornings brewing a really good cup of tea, reading the newspaper slowly, listening to the birds, and thinking about simple things. At first, he admitted it felt strange, but just a few weeks in, he noticed something he hadn't felt in years. The quiet wasn't scary. In fact, it was comforting. It brought him back to himself. No pressure, no roles to play, no performance to keep up. We've grown used to constant noise, voices, cars, notifications, reminders, demands. But there comes a moment, often later in life, when you discover that the silence you once avoided is actually where clarity lives, is where memories surface gently, where forgiveness begins, where beauty returns to things you once rushed past. Because peace doesn't come from being somewhere else or with someone else. It comes from within. It comes from the quiet confidence that you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You've done enough. You've lived enough. And now you've earned the right to live in the way that brings your heart the most ease. And I believe, with all my heart, that this kind of peace is not only healing, it's foundational. It helps you live longer, feel healthier, and most of all, live more deeply. You live simply because you are alive. You smile, not to keep the peace, but because you are truly gentle. I wonder, in your life right now, are there moments when you truly feel at peace? Maybe it's a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee. Maybe it's the sound of early birds outside your window. Maybe it's the simple act of journaling your thoughts. Or perhaps it's that rare, beautiful moment when you realize you finally stopped worrying because there's really nothing left to worry about. If you've experienced a moment like that, would you share it with me? Write down one small thing that brings peace to your heart so that I and others in this community on Golden Wise Elders can feel it with you. And if this part of the video feels like a gentle whisper to your soul, please tap the like button. Send this to someone who might also be searching for peace in their life. And don't forget to subscribe to Golden Wise Elders, because this is your space, your quiet corner, your weekly retreat where you can come back, listen to a story, and feel a little lighter inside. Now, once you've found peace in your surroundings, in the way you move through each day, something even more profound begins to unfold. Something most people never quite touch in their lifetime simply because they've been too busy to listen inward. That something is the ability to be completely at ease in your own company, to be alone with your thoughts, your feelings, and still feel full. It's not easy for most. Many people avoid silence their entire lives. They keep the TV on for background noise. They scroll through their phones to avoid the stillness. They chase conversation after conversation, not to connect, but to escape something inside. But you've grown through all the noise. You've lived enough to know that sitting quietly, just with yourself, isn't afraid anymore. In fact, it's freeing. I once met Walter at a community library talk. He said something I'll never forget. When I was young, I thought being alone meant being lonely. Now it's when I feel most alive. He told me about his new routine, mornings on the porch, a cup of tea in hand, no music, no TV, no agenda, just watching clouds drift by, noticing how the sunlight shifts through the trees, letting thoughts come and go like waves. And in that rhythm, he said things became clearer, lighter, more real. To feel at home in your own mind and your own emotions, that is a kind of maturity not everyone reaches, because it takes years to learn how to forgive yourself, to let go of the past, to stop blaming yourself for what you didn't know back then. It takes living through enough to be brave enough to sit quietly with it all and not be afraid. Maybe you've experienced that too. Maybe there was a time when thinking about the past felt painful, even unbearable. But one day you realized avoidance doesn't lead to peace. Facing it gently, slowly is how the healing begins. And so you start to sit still, to slow down, to remember, to understand, to forgive. And from there, to keep alive. When you can sit alone and not feel empty, but instead feel full, centered, and at peace, that's when you've touched a kind of freedom that runs deep within you. And I believe that may be one of the most beautiful signs of wisdom in our later years. What about you? Have you ever had a moment where you sat quietly, alone, but didn't feel lonely at all? Just complete? When was that moment? Would you share it with me? Leave a comment below so others watching this video can feel your story and maybe see a bit of their own in it too. If this part of the video feels like it came from your own heart, please let me know by tapping the like button. Share this message with someone you care about, someone who might still be learning how to be alone without fear. And subscribe to Golden Wise Elders, because this is your space, a place where you can return again and again, to feel seen, to feel heard, and to live more deeply with each story we share together. And when you've found enough peace to sit with your thoughts, to really listen to your inner world without flinching or rushing, what happens next isn't a transformation, it's a return to who you really are. Because once you're no longer caught up in the pressure to perform, to please, or to meet other people's expectations, you finally start living from your own heart. And in that moment, you realize you have a voice, you have a rhythm, you have a sense of identity that is clear, strong, and no longer needs approval to exist. I remember speaking with Patricia, a 68-year-old woman who was once known as the life of the party. She organized class reunions, showed up with a bright smile, and always said the right thing. But one day, after yet another social event, she looked at herself in the mirror and quietly realized she'd been living according to what others expected of her for far too long. So she began to say no. She spent more time in her small backyard garden. She picked up knitting, started journaling, took short solo trips to places that made her feel alive. She didn't feel lonely. In fact, she told me, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm finally living in rhythm with my own heartbeat. You know, when we're younger, we put so much effort into being accepted by our families, our workplaces, our communities. But as the years go by, and we've lived through every role life has asked of us, mother, father, partner, caretaker, hard worker, we begin to understand something powerful. We don't need to prove anything anymore. You've already lived. You've already loved. You've already given so much of yourself. And now you have the right to simply be you. You don't have to carry the weight anymore. You don't have to pretend to be cheerful all the time. You don't have to try so hard to fit in or keep up. All you need is to live in a way that brings ease to your heart, to wake up each morning knowing you're still here and living in a way that feels right for you. That kind of authenticity is not something you have to invent. It's been inside you all along. You just needed enough quiet to finally hear it. So I ask you, gently, are you living true to yourself right now? Is there something you once loved but let go of, just because you feared what others might think? Is there something you've longed to return to but held back from because you thought, maybe I'm too old for that now? If so, would you share it with me? Or if you've already passed through that season and found your way back to yourself, share your story so others walking this path can be inspired by your courage. And if you feel like you're living more truthfully, more gently, and with more peace each day, tap the like button as your quiet way of saying, yes, I'm on that path too. Share this video with someone you love, someone who might be searching for themselves again after years of living for others. And please, subscribe to Golden Wise Elders, because every week, we're here to remind you of something powerful. You are not walking this road alone and aging. It's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a deeper, more beautiful, and more meaningful chapter than you've ever lived before.